is Dongju Zhang, and she's a Chinese archaeologist and an associate professor at the College of Earth and Environmental Sciences at Lanzhou University, which is in Gansu in northwestern China. Dongju studied at Shandong University from 2000 to 2004, and she graduated with a bachelor's degree in archaeology. And from September 2004, she pursued graduate studies at Lanzhou University, where she joined the group of climatologist Fahu Chen. Her main research focus was on the Palaeolithic sites of the HEAS Plateau in China. She earned her PhD in physical geography from Lanzhou University in December 2010. And following that, she joined the Faculty of Environmental Archaeology at that university. And she changed her research direction from the HEAS Plateau to the Tibetan Plateau. And this is when she began to study the now famous Shaheen Mandible. She's been a visiting scholar at the Department of Anthropology at the University of California in Los Angeles from January 2008 to September 2009. And she was also, between 2009 October to March 2010, at the Römisch-Germanisches Central Museum in Mainz in Germany as a visiting scholar. Today, Dongju is going to speak about her amazing research on Denisovans in the Tibetan Plateau. And I'm sure you'll join me in welcoming her. Dongju, if you're able to share your screen now, and we'll listen with great interest to your presentation. Thank you so much for coming along and giving us a talk today.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much for your invitation and your introduction. And I'm very glad to meet you all here online. Now I'm trying to share my screen here. So you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, I will start now. So I'll play it. So as Tom introduced, in the past 10 years, I and my team, our team, work on the Tibetan Plateau to answer the questions about when and how people spread from the low elevation regions to the Tibetan Plateau. And during this process, during this long process, we found the Denisovans on the Tibetan Plateau. So today, I'm glad to share with you about our recent studies in the Baixia Casta Cave, including the HEAS Mandible. So you can hear me clearly, right? Okay.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, I will continue. So Denisovans is a familiar name to people now. So we know that Denisovan fossils were first found in Denisova cave. So they are also named after the cave name. But the number of the Denisovan fossils are small, and also the sizes are small. Compared to this small size and small numbers of Denisovan fossils, we know more about their genetic trees and the genetic history and the relations with other human groups. So in the Denisovan cave, not only Denisovan fossils found, there are also Neanderthal fossils found. And from the genetic studies, we know that the Denisovans are closely related to Neanderthals. They are sister groups. And also the genetic studies suggest that Denisovans has contributed in modern human genomes, but only in some regions. This include Eastern Eurasia and Oceania, and also Aboriginal Americans, which indicate that Denisovans might have distributed in these wide regions. Since 2010, the reports of Denisovans before 2019, there are no more Denisovan fossils were found around the world. So we really don't know where those Denisovans distributed. Genetic studies also find that Denisovan DNA also have EPAS1 gene, which is the hypoxia pathway gene. It's the genetic studies suggest that this EPAS1 gene is closely related to high altitude environment adaptations. So this gene, EPAS1 gene, can be found in 80% of the modern Tibetans and the Sherpas on the Tibetan Plateau today. So the studies in 2014 suggest that this EPAS1 gene might have get introgressed from Denisovans to modern Tibetans somehow, but we don't know when and where it happens. So this is the study which first connect Denisovans and the Tibetan Plateau. But if this hypothesis is true, how and when did Denisovans' DNA get introgressed to modern Tibetans? And did Denisovans ever live on the Tibetan Plateau? What do we know about the human history of the Tibetan Plateau? So let's move to the Tibetan Plateau. As you know, Tibetan Plateau is the highest and biggest plateau in the world. It is called the roof of the world. Its average elevation is higher than 4,000 meters, and its area is over 2.5 million square kilometers. So it's really big, and the climate or the environment on the plateau is special. It's generally cold, dry, and hypoxia, been a big challenge for the survival of many plants and animals, including humans. But on this high plateau, currently there are more than 13 million people are living on the plateau. They mainly lived on or relied on yak herding, sheep herding, and the barley. And also they use the yak dung as a fuel. So these are the special subsistence strategies to adapt to the high altitude environments. So how long can we trace back of this special subsistence strategy, and how long the human history of the Tibetan Plateau? These are big questions and very interesting questions. In 2014, our team published a paper in Science. This paper also studies the Tibetan Plateau, but focused on the Neolithic and the Bronze Age period. The archaeological sites, prehistoric archaeological sites found on the Tibetan Plateau. Those red dots are mainly Neolithic and Bronze Age sites. We can see that they mainly distributed in those eastern part of the plateau. And we studied those, we focused in this region, the northeastern Tibetan Plateau, on this sites. We did archaeobotanic and the zooarchaeological studies of those sites. We found that millet-based agriculture started to appear on the Tibetan Plateau around 5,200 years, but restricted in the low elevation regions below 2,500 meters. And more than 1,000 years later, about 3,600 years, barley and wheat started to appear on the plateau, and also sheep herding appeared, and probably yak herding too. And this economic change helped people to spread from these low elevation regions to these high elevation regions, about 3,000 meters, about 3,000 meters. So we in 2015, we know that human history on the Tibetan Plateau can be traced back to 5,200 years. So are there human activities before 2,500 years? The answer is yes, but the evidence is fewer. So on this map, we can see that those green dots are the Paleolithic sites, which are older than 6,000 years. So in from 2006 to 2015, the Paleolithic size numbers didn't change very much. So these numbers are the Paleolithic size on the Tibetan Plateau. Among those sites, there are many surface localities, only stone artifacts collected on the surface, no archaeological context, and especially in these high elevation regions. Fortunately, in the northeastern part, there are several or many Paleolithic sites with stratigraphy and which can be reliably dated, and which will help us to understand the earlier human history of the Tibetan Plateau. So by dating those sites, this work is done by Brantingham et al. By dating those sites, Brantingham et al. Found that those sites are concentrated between 15,000 years and 6,000 years. So they are very young. They are very young sites. They are Paleolithic sites. As those sites, they collected mainly microblade technology products and some simple HEAS features in these sites. Among those sites, there's only one older site, which is called Lenghu site. And in this site is on a lake shoreline, and only one blade is found on the surface of the lake shoreline, and it is probably produced by Levallois technology, but there are no more other stone artifacts for us to better understand it. And Brantingham et al. Dated the ice wedge of the on this shoreline and concluded that this site might be as old as 27,000 years. So in 2006, there is only one probable older site. It seems that humans suddenly appear on the Tibetan Plateau very late, around 15,000 years. So it seems there is a big gap before 15,000 years. Whether there are indeed human activities there, and who are they? How did they adapt to the high altitude environments? So these are all questions, interesting questions. In 2018, a team from IVPP found a new site in the southern Tibetan Plateau. This site is in a lake basin. It is called Niadiv. In this site, they collect a lot of stone artifacts. And these stone artifacts are mainly blade technology products from this place produced from these prismatic blade cores. And in fact, in the site, there are only stone artifacts there. So almost no animal bones were found, and almost no charcoal. So they dated this site with OSL method, and it is dated to 40 to 30,000 years, which means that humans already occupied the interior of the Tibetan Plateau 40 to 30,000 years. But this is on the only older site. So it seems this site provided the hard evidence of the early human occupation of the Tibetan Plateau. But before 2018, this is the only one site, as there are only stone artifacts in the site. So we still don't know a lot of important things, like who are they, and what's their subsistence strategies, and what did they do there. So there are still many questions about the human history of the Tibetan Plateau. About the question who are these people? So for this Niadiv site, as they are blade technology products, it is very possible that Niadiv is occupied by modern human, and also the age of the site is 40 to 30,000 years. It's late. It is the right age for modern humans in this region. And besides the Tibetan Plateau, there are two other high altitude regions in the world, which is Asapia Plateau and the Andes Mountains. So in these two sites, there are also mainly stone artifacts were found. And also there's no human remains, so we don't know who they are. But from the age, they're also younger than 50,000 years. So it is very possible. And people believe that adapting to the high altitude environments is only modern humans could do it. So is it true? Is it restricted to modern humans to adapt to high altitude environments? So to answer these questions, we spend a lot of time to do work on the Tibetan Plateau, especially in the northeastern part of the plateau. In 2019, we published our studies of this Xiahe mandible. This mandible is from this county called Xiahe County. So it is named after the county name. The discovery history of the mandible is mysterious, as it is found by a local monk about 40 years ago from this cave. It is the Baishiya Cast cave. We call it BKC now. The local monk, when he found this mandible, he think this is special. Then he gave it to donate to the sixth Gongtang living Buddha, who is very famous in this region. And subsequently, he gave this mandible for us to study. So this mandible is not from archaeological excavation. So there's no archaeological context. Dating the mandible is difficult. In the beginning, we made many dating plans. Finally, we decided to only date the carbonate crust on the mandible, use uranium thorium dating. We collect 3 samples and got 3 dating results. Generally, it is around 160,000 years, indicating that the mandible, the minimum age of the mandible is 60,000 years, which means that this is the oldest archaeological remains on the Tibetan Plateau at that time. And also it is the first human fossils found on the Tibetan Plateau. So what's the species of this mandible? First, we did micro CT scanning of this mandible. We did many measurements and anthropological analysis. It seems that it is different. It is very different from Neanderthals and modern humans. And also it is not the same to the Homo erectus. So we conclude that it is in the variation of Middle Pleistocene hominids. It has the distinct morphological traits in the mandible, on the mandible, and the teeth too. So from the morphological studies, we can't say exactly the species, which species it belongs to. At the same time, we also did ancient DNA and paleoproteomic analysis. Unfortunately, we didn't extract ancient DNA from the mandible, perhaps because it is too old. But fortunately, we got paleoproteins from one dating sample. Although these proteins are highly degraded or deaminated, but it has the special proteins of Denisovans. So we conclude that this Xiahe mandible is belong to the Denisovans or Denisovan-related populations. So this mandible is the first Denisovan evidence found outside of Denisovan cave, and also comparing to the small sizes of those Denisovan fossils from Denisovan cave. This mandible is the biggest Denisovan fossils so far. So it provides many important morphological traits, morphological characteristics of Denisovans, which can make it possible for us to compare Denisovans with other human groups. And also it provides a possibility for us, that the modern Tibetans on the Tibetan Plateau today probably get the E+1 by introgression from the local Denisovans. But it is only a hypothesis, as we didn't extract DNA from this mandible. So we can't answer this question now, but it is possible. Almost at the same time, geneticists also reconstructed the Denisovan anatomy using DNA methylation maps. And our mandible the Xianhe mandible plays an important role in verifying this reconstruction. This study is also important for us to understand the human history of the Tibetan Plateau, as I showed you there. So the earlier finds, the earlier archaeological finds on the Tibetan Plateau are all younger than 40,000 years. So now the Xianhe mandible is 160,000 years old, which makes the human history of the Tibetan Plateau 120 years earlier. And also it is identified as Denisovans, which is archaic humans. So which means that the Denisovans arrived on the Tibetan Plateau much earlier than the modern humans, and perhaps they already started to adapt to high altitude environments. So we still know this long history of the Tibetan Plateau. There is only Xianhe mandible. We don't know what do they use and what do they eat, and how long and how wide do they spread or distributed on the plateau. So there are still many questions. To answer these questions, we need to go back to the site, and we need to do more survey. So this is the Baixia Casta cave site. In fact, as soon as we started to study this mandible, we already started our work in this cave. That's around 2010. The Baixia Casta cave is a very big cave. So this is the reconstruction of those, so the 3D reconstruction of the cave. This is the entrance. So it's a long entrance chamber, and there inside there are several big chambers inside. So like here, this is the inside of the chamber, and in the cave, it is warm and it is dry, not very humid, and it is good for human to live. But as this cave is a holy cave for the local Tibetan people, you see those flags, and so we are not allowed to dig in the site. But we visited this. But as this cave is very important, the mandible is found in this cave, so there must be some archaeological remains in the site. We want to find them. So we visited this site many times since 2010, but we are not allowed to dig in the site, so we are not exactly sure whether there are archaeological remains there. It is until 2016. Occasionally, we found some stone artifacts on the surface of the surface in the entrance chamber, associated with some animal bones and also charcoal too. It is come out because of the previous steps. It is that the small profile is broken, so some stone artifacts and those animal bones come out. And before this, we can't see any prehistoric things in the cave. So during this visit, we are sure that there are archaeological remains there, but we don't know how old they are, and we don't know how do these remains related to the mandible. But it tells that this site is worth to excavate. We must work for that. After several years negotiation with the temple and with the local government, we are allowed to do test excavations in the cave. So this is the entrance chamber. So we did 2 test units excavation in 2018. First, we dig the T1. They are all 2 meters, 2 square meters, 2 by 1 square meters. So in T1, we found first found the rich archaeological remains, including stone artifacts and animal bones. But at about 80 centimeters deep, we reach big rocks. We can't go further. So we changed it to a new location, T2. Surprisingly, this T2 is very good because we can dig and dig. We can dig further, and also in this unit, there are richer archaeological remains here, and with very clear stratigraphy, and not many disturbance, except one historical piece here. So that's in 2018. We didn't manage to finish this the excavation in this T2 in 2018, as the time is very short at that time they give us for excavation. And you see that this is in winter time. It is in the end of December. So we have to stop it before January. In 2019, we reopened the unit and expanded the excavation area to 4 square meters. And this time we have more people and we have more time. So we did a more careful excavation in the site. As there are the archaeological remains are so rich there, so our excavation is very slow, goes very slow. And you see those rocks or stones here, most of them are artifacts, and between them there are many bone fragments. So our excavation goes very slowly. So in the end of 2019, we finished the excavation, but we still didn't reach the bottom of the units. But we got a lot of archaeological remains, and from the profile we can see the layers. The stratigraphy is very clear, which provide a good base for our future dating of this of the site. So before dating, we did many measurements on the sediments. We can see from the grain size studies, we can see that most of the fine deposits in the site. Those fine deposits in the unit, they are mainly loess. And also this SEM photos suggest that they are loess, means they are blowed in or flowed in the cave. And it is possible to do OSL dating of these fine sediments. And besides those loess, there are also some carbonate deposits which produced in the cave. And also from the sharp edges of the bone fragments and stone artifacts, we can see that the deposits in the site, they are all primary deposits. Not many, there are no obvious disturbance or the second deposition processes. So they are all primary depositions, which is good for OSL dating. We collected 15 bone samples for radiocarbon dating and 12 OSL samples for single grain dating. I want to thank Tom, because Tom dated all these bones in Oxford University in 2018, I think 18 or 19. Based on these dating results, we established a chronological framework for this stratigraphy from 190 to 30,000 years. As in each layer, there are rich archaeological remains. So we can say that human occupation in the cave is very long, is from at least 190,000 years to 30,000 years. And those artifacts, stone tools, those stone artifacts are mainly made on the local pebbles from the riverbed, which is in front of the cave. And those artifacts are mainly made by simple core and flake technology. There are many scrapers, points, and notches, but they are not delicately modified. They are all expedient tools. We are now still working on these artifacts. And also there are many animal bones from the site. Our current identification suggests that more than 20 species appeared in the site in this cave, including gazelles, fox, and wild bovies, hyena, rhinos, and there are many species. And on these bones, many of these bones, there are cut marks and percussion marks, including hyena bones. Means that most the bones in this site accumulated due to human activity. More importantly, we found ancient DNA from the sediments. So we collected the samples, the sediment samples for DNA analysis. In some layers, layer 10, 7, 4, 3, 2, animal bones, paleoanimal DNA was found. And in these 4 layers, 7, 4, 3, and 2, human mitochondrial DNA was found. And those ages, the ages of these layers are 100,000 years, 60,000 years, and 45,000 years. Further genetic studies tell us that the human mitochondrial DNA is Denisovan DNA. And those Denisovan DNA are closely related to the late Denisovans from the Denisova cave. So including the layer 2, 4, and layer 7. So the layer 7 is the age is 100,000 years, so which diverged earlier from the younger layers in BKC and the late Denisovans from Denisova cave. That implying that in the late Pleistocene, Denisovans perhaps distributed in a much wider region in East Eurasia, and they are within the population. They are closely related to each other. So we see this picture again. So besides the Xiahe mandible, there are more Denisovan occupations in the site, and it seems continuously the Denisovans occupied this site. And compared to other younger sites, this site, BKC site, is the oldest and longest occupied site on the Tibetan Plateau. So it generally filled this gap. But before 2020, the BKC is the only site on the Tibetan Plateau which is older than 40,000 years. And if the Denisovans are widely distributed in Eastern Eurasia, so then there must be more Denisovan occupations on the Tibetan Plateau. And also, we still don't know much about those Denisovans. As I mentioned earlier, we didn't reach the bottom of the T2 and T3 in 2019. Last year, in 2021, we continued to excavate the site, and finally we reached about 3 meters. And in these lower layers, we also found the rich archaeological remains, including bones and stone artifacts. So which means that the human occupation of the site can be much earlier than 190,000 years. And we're not sure whether there are also Denisovans. Our future studies perhaps will tell us more about those occupants. And besides this BKC, we did a much more wider archaeological surveys on the Tibetan Plateau. In 2015 and 16, we found another site which called GGF1. Is only about 300 kilometers north to BKC site, and it is an open air site. Rich stone artifacts and animal bones were found at the bottom of this loess profile. By OSO dating of this site, we found that this site is occupied from 120 to 90,000 years, which is contemporaneous to, which has the same time with Baixia Casta Cave, and it is in the last interglacial period with much humid and a warmer climate. So there is no human remains were found in this site. So we don't know the species of the occupants, but because the GGF1 is very close to the BKC and have the same age, so it is possible that there are Denisovan occupations. This is the site. We did excavation of the site in 2020. So we now are studying the liths and other archaeological remains now. Hopefully we can get some more information about the site in future. So this is the site. This is the thick occupation of the site. it lasted about 30,000 years. So besides this one, in 2020, another team published another old site on the Tibetan Plateau. It's also in southern Tibetan Plateau. It is called Kyusang site. In this site, many human hand and foot prints were found. The researchers dated these prints using iridium thorium dating. So this site is dated to about 200,000 years old. So it is another old site on the Tibetan Plateau. But there's no archaeological remains associated with those hand and footprints. So we don't know, we know very little about those occupants. Perhaps they are Denisovans, but we don't know. And there is another site found recently in the eastern Tibetan Plateau. In this site, a lot of Sholen hand axes were found. This site is called a Piluo site in Sichuan province. The primary dating of the site is older than 130,000 years. So it's the other older site on the plateau. But as it is newly found, and no formal publications have been published yet. So these are only the news reports. So on the Tibetan Plateau, besides BKC, there is the GDF1, and there are two other sites, Piluo and Kyusang site. So although these sites are all new and are all under studies, so there are many questions need to be answered. But just from the age and the location of the site, we can say that the archaic hominids probably intensively lived on the occupied the eastern part of the Tibetan Plateau in the late Middle and late Pleistocene. So for the early human history of the Tibetan Plateau, we have more sites now. So in future years, perhaps we will know more about them. We're not sure they are all Denisovans, but they are very probably they're Denisovans or other archaic hominids. In fact, the Xianhe mandible and the Baixia cast cave is also important for us to understand the human evolution history in East Asia. There are many archaic hominid fossils, and the Middle Pleistocene and early late Holocene, late Pleistocene sites were found in this region, but we know very little about the human populations, the hominid populations. Now the Xianhe mandible can be used to compare with other hominid fossils in East Asia. Probably we can find more Denisovan remains in this region in the recent years. Okay, so a short summary of my talk. First, we find that the Denisovans are the earliest known hominid groups arrived on the plateau so far. The Denisovans occupied the plateau at least 160,000 years, at around 100,000 years and 60,000 years, probably as late as 45,000 years, and even younger or older, as the human occupation of the site, BKC site, is much older than 160,000 years and it is also younger than 45,000 years. And also, the Xiang Denisovans on the Tibetan Plateau are closely related to Denisovans from Denisova cave. So from this, we can know more about the Denisovan population. As I already mentioned, perhaps there are more Denisovan remains need to be discovered in future on the Tibetan Plateau and across East Asia, and this may help us to understand the human adaptation history to the high altitude environments, and perhaps in future, perhaps we will know how the modern Tibetans get their E+1 from the Denisovans. Okay, this work is done in the past decade, and many groups are involved in this study. I must thank to all our collaborators and our team who did very hard work, important contributions to these studies. Okay, thank you all.
Well, thanks very much, Dongju. I think if we were all together in an auditorium, everybody would be giving you a very big standing ovation of that excellent presentation. Thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. Now, I'm sure that there are many questions, and so I would invite people, if anybody has a question, you can either type it into the chat, or you can put your hand up, and I will try and go to you, and you can speak your question. I hope that's possible. I'm sure that Maeve will tell me if it is or not. But we would like to, I think, genuinely thank you very much for your fascinating presentation. So think about some questions. Either, as I say, type them into the chat, or raise your hand, and I will. If I see a hand raised, I'll come to you. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask a question, if I could, Dongju. And I wondered if there's any evidence for, if there's any evidence at all for bone working in the layers that are associated with Denisovans. Is there any evidence for some, for example, bone points?
In fact, so far we are working on those bones now. We find some expedient bone tools, but no bone points. There are some bone retouchers. Okay,
interesting. And are they found sort of throughout the sequence, or just towards the sort of more recent parts of the sequence?
Throughout the sequence, from the lower layer, like layer 10, to the younger layers.
Oh, fascinating. Now, Sasha Wagner has a question, and she asks, how certain are you that the mandible really is from Baixia Karst Cave? What's your confidence regarding that?
Okay, so yeah, this question, as soon as we get the mandible, we have the same question. So before we study this mandible, we are told that this mandible is come from the cave. So we need to check. We need to confirm that. So we went to the cave many times, and in fact, besides this cave, we surveyed many caves in that region, in the Ganjia Basin. And unfortunately, we didn't get any archaeological remains from other caves in the other caves in this region. And there are, when we got this mandible, we heard the story. I mean, the person who found this mandible told the living Buddha how and where and how the cave looks like, and how he found this mandible. As I mentioned, this cave is a famous holy cave in this region. So a lot of local Tibetans visit this cave every year, and also the local monks. Some of the monks, they spend many times or long periods in the cave for meditation. And so this is the only cave in this region which have those intensive modern human activities, this Buddhism in activities. So it is closely related to the, so it is reasonable that the monk found this mandible in this cave.
Yes.
So yes, to prove that is difficult. But we did the, as I told you in this talk, we did excavation in the cave, and we did find those archaeological remains, and we did find this this old archaeological remains, which have the similar age or older or younger than the mandible. So all this evidences confirms that. And besides, more importantly, we found the Denisovan DNA from the site. We didn't find any Denisovan DNA outside of Denisova cave. And we also know that the Xiahe mandible is Denisova. So all this prove that, and we believe that it is from this cave.
Okay, excellent. Would you mind unsharing your screen so we can see you better? Could you just unshare?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Thanks. And now another question has come up. This time from Gopesh Jha, and he asks about whether you can share more about the nature of the toolmaking technology at BKC. How similar or different is it from other sites in the Tibetan Plateau, including from Denisova Cave as well? I'm really glad that this question's been asked, because I was wondering if you had any idea of the similarities between the tools at BKC compared, for example, to Denisova Cave.
Yes, good question. I'm sorry that I didn't talk much about it, because the careful studies of the stone tools is going. But just from the primary studies, we already know that, or see that it is very different from the stone artifacts from Denisova Cave. In Denisova Cave, there the lava technology dominated, and also plates were found there. But in BKC, we didn't find any lava technology. There's no blades. So those simple cores, discord cores and simple cores and flakes, they are similar to those we found in North China, other Paleolithic sites in North China. And as I mentioned, on the Tibetan Plateau, in the Niadiv, which is 40,000 years old, in this site, there are blade technology found, right? But here, there's no blade technology. And from the younger sites, which are younger than 15,000 years, there are mainly microlithic sites there. Microblades dominate in those sites. So this one and the new one I mentioned, the Pilor site, found in the eastern Tibetan Plateau, there are Shaolin hand axes found there. But also before Shaolin hand axe, there are also simple flake and simple corner flake technologies there. And so after the Shaolin hand axes, there are small ponds, some ponds there. But this site is not formally published yet. So this only the some of the reports in the news. So we don't know very exactly about this site yet. But we can see on the Tibetan Plateau, it seems complex. If we say these technologies represents different populations, that seems different populations are there. So far, all this work are new in the recent 5 years or recent 2 years. So it seems we have more questions than what we know.
Yes, which is why it's such an amazing and very exciting place. Thank you very much for answering that question. Now, I missed a question before Martina Molak asked. She's wondering whether, if you tried zooms on your non-identifiable bone fragments to see if there are any hominin bones amongst them. Is there anyone working on that?
Yes, yes, well, we did. I know you will be curious about it. We started to work on this 2 years ago. No, from 2018 we started to work on it, and now we screened a lot of specimens. Now we have some new finds. Hopefully, hopefully we can publish them in future.
Wow. Exciting. Goodness me, I can't wait. And then Marika, who is here at the University of Vienna and is an expert on microarchaeology, she asks, is there any fire evidence at these sites associated with Denisovans? Have you got any idea of what their fire use behavior was like?
Good question. That's also what we want to know. From the stratigraphy, I don't know whether you noticed or not, there is a layer 8, which is dark, is red, dark, and thin. This layer seems is fire activity, and about it, layer 7 and layer 9, it seems also burned. In fact, we tried to do the soil macromorphology analysis now, and we hope to find more evidence. And from the bones, there are not many burned bones, but there are. And also through the sequence, the whole sequence, there are charcoal, small charcoal pieces, but not many, and they are all very small. I think perhaps because of the old age. So no HEAS was found. Perhaps because our excavation area is small, it's only 4 square meters. But we can see there are fire activity there, but not so many evidence.
I see. Okay, fascinating. Well, if there are any more questions, nice time to ask. I could keep on talking and asking you questions all afternoon, Dongju. Oh, look, Elmira's asked a question. Now, she understands that in some layers, there's evidence for equids, horses in DNA in the site. Considering the age of this mitochondrial DNA should be from wild horses. She's wondering how complete is the mitochondrial DNA recovered? And are you performing further studies on animal mitochondrial DNA, particularly horses? That's because Elmira is really into the DNA and the genetics of horse populations. So that's perhaps the reason why she's asking that. Do you know anything about the DNA type of DNA being extracted and perhaps from horses?
Yeah, this question I can't answer very well because I'm not a genetic expert. But yes, there are equid mitochondrial DNA there. And this work is done by Qiaomei. So Qiaomei is working on it. And especially in those, this equid DNA is mainly from the older layers. The older layers, the DNA not, this is only the, this publication is only from our very first series of samples collected in 2018 and 19. So now we collect more samples, and Qiaomei is working on it now. So I don't know how complete those equid DNA are, and perhaps she and her team will provide more about those DNA
that's
data.
great. Elmira, that's Xiaomei Fu, and she's at the IVPP in Beijing.
Yeah.
So you could perhaps ask her more information about that. Okay, so thanks. Okay, so we've had many questions, so we're very grateful. Everybody's writing nice comments about what a great talk it was. I'd like to reiterate that. I thought that was a really fascinating and terrific talk. The thing I really like about this is that it's so new and so amazing to think how far things have happened in the last few years. I mean, as you said in your talk, from a period where we only knew Bronze Age and maybe Neolithic people, now we have this whole new world that's opened up of human occupants dating back to, perhaps more than 160,000 years old. And the amount of information that's suddenly been generated is truly fascinating. And that's in no small part due to you and your team. And so we thank you very much for your amazing talk. We wish you all the very best for new research. We're looking forward so much to hearing more about it, and perhaps one day in the future we can ask you back and you can update us more about your work. So thank you from all of us here in Vienna and many people around the world. Thank you so much for your amazing talk, Dongju Zhang. Now, I would just like to finally ask to remind everybody that next month we have the next talk in this seminar series on human evolution and the Paleolithic, and that's going to be delivered by another dynamic female researcher called Dr. Viola Schmidt, and she works here in Vienna at the Austrian Archaeological Institute. She works in Africa, and she is going to be giving us a talk called Shifting Gear, New Results on the Southern African Middle to Late Stone Age Transition from Umlaut to Zwana Rock Shelter. And that talk is going to be on the 12th of December, a Monday, the same as this, and the same time at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Vienna time, Central European time. So I look forward to welcoming you back there. It's been great to see so many people in the audience. We had around 50 people online watching this, and it's great to see so many familiar faces. Hi, Anat in Israel, for example, and Peter in Canada, and of course, Dongju in China. Thank you so much for everyone to attend. If you want to know more about what's happening in the seminar series, you can go to HEAS.at. I've just sent the link in the chat. Register and you'll get our regular newsletter, which tells you all about all of the events that we're running, 3 different seminar series, lots of things happening, lots of events. Thank you so much for attending. And thank you so much again, Dongju, for a truly wonderful talk. And goodbye, everybody. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you very much, Tom. And thank you all. Thank you
See
for
you,
your
Dongju.
time and questions and comments.
Yeah, thank you. It was great. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for organizing this event. Thank you.
Auf
Bye.
Wiedersehen. Bye-bye.
Auf Wiedersehen.